right. So today we have Mina from Platform Calgary. We're going to be doing a quick chat about artificial intelligence, grant writing, and how it can support the nonprofit sector. I know there's tons of questions out there about how to use it, what to use. I'm still learning it myself. I've been doing grants and working in the nonprofit sector for over 10 years, and my specialty is grants, grant strategy, grant writing, all those good things. And now there's this tool out there that it's like, how do we use this to be more efficient, to support us better? And I know organizations are asking the same questions. There's also going to be, pitfalls and challenges that come with anything new to our sector. So I wanted to bring in some experts and have conversations around this. Mina is our expert of the day. And yeah, Mina, I'll toss it to you. Can you do a quick intro of yourself, sort of like situate yourself in terms of technology or AI, the nonprofit sector, and kind of how that looks like for you?
Absolutely. Thanks, Sara. And I really appreciate you having me on. This is my first podcast. So I appreciate you and appreciate all the work that you do for the nonprofit sector. It makes a huge difference and just love everything that you're doing. So this is just such a privilege for me. So thank you. My name is Mina, and I worked for about 10 years in the nonprofit sector. So quite a long time. And I basically had the fun job of fundraising. So I held the actual title of grant manager for a while, and we had a very, very successful run in a whole bunch of organizations. And what I mean by that is I worked for organizations in health, community health, in education, and housing, and immigration. And essentially, my job was to churn out as much grant proposals as possible, and of course, fundraise as much as possible, both from annual giving all the way into principal gifts. So that was my wheelhouse for about 10 years. And it was a really wonderful opportunity to get to know the nonprofit sector in a big way. And with that, also, it's a very difficult process to actually do the whole fundraising. I think a lot of people get burnt out because they throw their whole self into them. And that was definitely me for 10 years. And I absolutely loved it, but decided to do a career shift, quite a bit of a career shift, in fact. So did an MBA specializing in social enterprise, ran my own consulting company where I helped launch startups and nonprofits, did a stint as a business development director for a tech firm here in Calgary. And now I find myself at Platform Calgary, which is really the front door of innovation in Calgary. I work with a ton of community partners, but more importantly than that, I work with around 300 startups per year. So I really have worked with a ton of startups, and a lot of whom are working with artificial intelligence, a lot of whom are working with large language models and complex models. So I get to work with some of these folks, and my whole job is to help facilitate the process of thinking through a problem in order to get their startups into a commercialized way where they're making money, they are making the difference that they want in community. And I'm very, very privileged to be here. So that's a little bit about me and my background.
Awesome. That's super cool. I love sort of the background, the transition, the pivots. We all have different desires and passions, and sometimes we got to change lanes to be able to follow those. So I love setting the stage in that as well, because I know lots of organizations, they have turnover and they have different people coming in and out of their roles. And sometimes it's not the fit that's not right. It's the passion that changes, or, new opportunities that come up. So that's really cool. Thank you for sharing that with us. So let's dive into sort of like AI and grant writing. I'd love to hear just like your initial thoughts on what impact is it going to have? Is it positive for the sector? Is it scary for the sector? Like, what are your feelings and initial opinions on this?
Sure. I think for all of us, as we entered into the pandemic and we learned about this thing called GPT, and we're all stuck at home, and then we start to realize, oh, this thing's a game changer. We started to see practical applications in a number of different ways, right? So we saw folks writing articles, and we saw people making AI cute pictures of their cats and all sorts of different things. And so as nonprofit sector is concerned, as we enter into this new realm of artificial intelligence and large language models, we're starting to see certain verticals where we can actually apply the incredible technology that goes into artificial intelligence and large language models. There are so many different applications to it. And to your point, yes, there's definitely a lot of risk, and I definitely want to talk about that. But let's just talk about the opportunities for a second, because as we kind of think about the practical applications of large language models, as someone who has written hundreds of grants, you kind of start to realize there's a certain pattern of writing and there's a certain algorithm of how to actually write these things. Someone as talented as Sara here, she knows exactly how to write these things because she understands exactly who the funder is, she understands exactly who the client is, and she understands exactly how they meet in the middle. I think with large language model, the opportunity is to actually teach these large language models exactly that intersection between what the funder needs to hear, what the project that you want to have up and running, created, and to solve some of the most wicked social issues that we have. This is a perfect opportunity. I think on the balance, there are risks when you're working with artificial intelligence, and that's why I don't think at this point, or potentially at any point, we're ever going to replace grant writers. I think it's super important to actually understand what artificial intelligence and LLMs can do and what they can't do. One of the things that is risky and that they can't do is identify and be responsible for bias. You have to understand that they're going to make mistakes, they're going to hallucinate, especially right now, even with advancements of great models, we're still having these issues. And so the opportunity for me, at least, is to utilize the AI models for good. So as we kind of talk about the nonprofit sector, everyone's got this wonderful idea about how to solve youth homelessness or have this really great program that they really want to run specifically about youth unemployment rates going down, or it might be food security, or it might be housing, all of which you have to articulate, you have to make a really great presentation. And I can't imagine anything better than a large language model that's absolutely trained to articulate exactly what the value proposition is, what you're bringing to community. And I think it's really important for nonprofits to realize their mission. And this is just one tool in order to achieve that mission.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the element of using AI as a tool has been the biggest sort of golden thread as I've been diving into this rather than a replacement. And as you're saying, that there's a nuance to how you bring the information together from the funder to the project and how they really come together in an application. That's where AI is not there yet. Like they don't know how to bring those two together yet, to marry those two together. And organizations have to have a really strong idea about what they're trying to do. And so AI can support, fleshing that idea out. It can support, putting some language to the ideas. It can support with editing or formatting, or yet just that brainstorming element. But as you were talking about, it can't address bias. It can't address, incorrect information. So it's really important for organizations, if they're using this as a tool, to know that what it spits out, that's not your end product. Like by far, that is not your end product. You still need to really comb through to make sure what they're giving you is accurate. And then I think, again, back to how this information connects to one another to apply to a funder and then connect to your project. It might be giving you some really good language, but then it might not be using the funder's language. It might not be using your language as an organization. And so, yes, it gives you some tweaks, but then there might be some editing. More likely, there's going to be a lot of editing. I've talked to a couple grant writers, and they say they use it for this brainstorm, they use it for this foundation, and it almost takes them just as long to edit what AI gives them as it does to actually write the proposal. But it can be built on, and the tool is only going to improve. But it's interesting, and I just like to emphasize for groups and organizations that what AI gives you is only going to be as good as what gets put in. And then it's also going to be up to you as an organization to make sure what it provides to you is accurate, it's in line with your organization, and that it lines up with the funder as well.
Yeah, just to build on that too, is that AI as it stands right now is a bit of a misnomer, because artificial intelligence, the proper definition of it, we have large language models. We don't necessarily have artificial intelligence where it's artificial and it's intelligent. We don't have that yet, to your point, Sara.
Okay.
We do have is large language models. And large language models are only good as the prompt engineer and the fine tuning that you provide to it. So
Yeah.
in order for, this is one recommendation that I would highly suggest, and hopefully, someone who's listening to this really understands what I'm trying to say. When you talked about the language of the funder, and if you don't get that right, if you can't prompt engineer the large language model to understand this is the language that I need to use, then I wouldn't even bother with large language models. I wouldn't even bother because you really need to understand the prompt engineering in order for to make this thing as a useful tool so that it would understand and spit back the language that the funder needs. It needs to understand exactly who you are as a nonprofit, what your mission is, what really drives you, what you're excited about. And there are ways to actually engineer a large language model to understand those things and to come up with a very real and human-like language, but it certainly does take a little bit of engineering. It certainly does take a little bit of more effort than one anticipates when they're first getting into artificial intelligence. So, Sarah, I couldn't agree with you more. The fact is, you're gonna have to do a lot of editing, you're gonna have to do a lot of oversight, and even when you are a really great engineer, you still need to do those things to safeguard some of the risks.
For sure. Do you have any tips for organizations on how they can start learning how to engineer prompts that are going to give them better outputs?
There is a wonderful class for $70 on Coursera, and it is run by Google, and it's AI for everyone. And it is a brilliant opportunity to get your feet wet and to understand what is this all about. So when I talk about AI for everyone, I mean it is teaching you the fundamentals and how all of this, when we're talking about artificial intelligence and large language models, we're talking about billions of data sets that have been pumped into this one model that can essentially, hopefully with the right prompt, spit back at you what you want to hear. So you want to understand a little bit more of the infrastructure of what goes into a large language model and artificial intelligence. It sounds intimidating, but it really isn't. And when you start to kind of think about the whole of human knowledge and all of the incredible data that's out there, you start to understand, okay, so if it's gaining access to all this information, then it's most likely gaining a ton of information from folks who are, countries like the United States, obviously, where there's just proficient amount, a ton of information from there. So there's a certain bias that it's going to have. So my two tips essentially is really get to know what artificial intelligence is about, take one of those classes about artificial intelligence for everyone, and also understand it's all about the prompt engineering. So you kind of want to mess around with it for a little bit to really understand how it works. And it's not going anywhere. The genie's in the bottle. So we've got to be able to be proficient in it. And I cannot wait for the nonprofit sector to really dive in and get their, hands dirty when it comes to just experimenting with it and getting to know it a little bit better.
For sure. And I think there's an opportunity not under a looming deadline, like, oh, the grant's due in a week. Let's start using AI. Probably not the first time to start using it. As you're saying, experiment, play with it, like help it with your project development or conceptualization of ideas and see how it works. Like you're talking about that prompt engineering, the better you get at it. I know that's something that I want to start playing with a little bit more for me, just to get better at how to use it. It is a tool, but it's also going to be a skill of how to leverage technology in ways that it's actually supportive. It doesn't actually take us more time. Usually we're using technology to be more efficient, to save us time. And so it does require us to put some time in to understand what these systems are doing, to understand how they work, so then we can use them most effectively. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think you put it brilliantly, right? It solves two issues: the time-consuming nature of grant writing itself and optimization of the written process itself. So those are the two things that once you've actually got it to a point of sophistication, you're going to save time and you're going to optimize your chances of winning.
Win-win.
Yeah.
Awesome. You did talk about, you're talking about these large data sets that, go into these large language models. That I got the right language. Okay. So that if people hear LLMs, that's what they are, large language models. I had to look that up before because I was like, there's all these words and I don't know what they all mean. So that's what that stands for. But you were talking about the data that goes into them is sort of seeped in bias. It's with, the status quo of how history, in a sense, has gone, how data has been collected, it's been managed, it's been shared. And so what do you think are the risks of AI or the direction that we need to go, or what we need to be aware of maybe when it comes to the data that AI is using in terms of spitting out or supporting existing biases or supporting maybe the toxic status quo when it comes to systemic racism or the patriarchy or things like that? Can we avoid this at all?
There is this is where, kudos to the folks in the nonprofit sector, the fundraisers, the frontline workers, the social workers, the executive directors, all the way down the line. They understand the bias more than anyone. And they understand when they are inputting information into ChatGPT or any of the other large language models, it's going to come back with the very generic information because, again, it's not fine tuned. But I can't imagine anybody more qualified to catch any of the biases than the folks at the nonprofit sector. They are the most dedicated and hardworking individuals that I've ever met in my entire life. Everyone across the board, anyone from the janitor all the way to the CEO. You know what I'm talking about exactly, Sarah. They're just incredible. Executive directors, sorry. They just know exactly what they're talking about. So there's nobody more qualified to be on the receiving end of this than them. And I really want to emphasize this point, is that if we don't participate as the nonprofit sector into artificial intelligence and large language models and to utilize it for good, it's just going to be utilized for evil. The expression is, if it's free, then that means that you are the product. And what that means is that ChatGPT, you can use it, it's free, but you start to realize that you're the product. You have to start to realize that you're going to have to shift your way of thinking into this particular product could be biased. In fact, it is biased. It has faults. It'll hallucinate. It's dangerous, to be completely honest. And you don't want to feed it really sensitive information. And I'm sure that we'll get into that as well.
Yeah.
But how do you utilize it for good? Because essentially we're going to be left on the wayside if we don't use it. Or we're going to actually get on the bus and say that, no, we're going to take this bus and we're going to actually drive it towards somewhere that's a better society, an opportunity where all the nonprofits have access to grant writing. I mean, let's just kind of call a spade a spade. The grant writing process in and of itself is a bit biased in the sense that large nonprofits have the capacity to pay for a grant writer. And I think that, again, it's super important to actually have someone who knows and can oversee all the grants that are going out. But that's also a bit of a bias because they're larger, they have capital, they can actually fundraise a little bit more efficiently and effectively. And so AI is actually a game changer in a lot of ways, right? You kind of think about it. If you're a small nonprofit, you're still going to need a grant writer, and hopefully you're going to be able to kind of get them on contract. Like I said, you need Sara. But that's the thing, though. Like it makes a lot of sense for me to ensure that these nonprofits, especially the smaller ones, which are 90% of our community, they understand that they can utilize this tool in order to fundraise and then create better opportunities for their communities. And so there's always inherent bias no matter what, but essentially I'm hoping that folks are going to take a chance on AI and utilize it for good.
That's great. You said so many things in there that I kind of want to elevate a little bit. That the nonprofit sector, everyone across the board, they're the ones in the strongest position to identify bias, to see through what is being fed out and fed in. And so I think it puts an onus on them, but it also empowers the sector to participate, because they're the ones that are going to be able to help shape, as you were saying, shape how this goes and the direction that it moves. So our involvement from the nonprofit sector is crucial to helping shape this, as well as the knowledge that they hold and the awareness they have about inequalities, about our systems, about the faults that our society has, that they are trying to address. They know it best, and I agree, working with them, they're just fantastic, and the passion that comes through is why I love to work in the nonprofit sector, because of that. And I think it's really amazing to highlight the position that nonprofit organizations have. Now, there was another piece I really wanted to highlight that escaped me now. We'll leave it there. If it comes back to me, I'll chime in. But I did want to kind of shift to the risks a little bit, and to the dangers that you kind of spoke of, because I think with nonprofits, technology isn't always at the forefront. Oh, that's what it was. It was, sorry, now I'm going to jump back. It was, how AI can help actually equal the playing field, or sorry, level the playing field a little bit from larger organizations to smaller organizations. I do think that it will help organizations elevate their opportunities. You'll need fewer resources or a little bit less time to help apply for applications. I do still think the skill set of what's important in an application and what's important to a funder, that skill set still requires a little bit of massaging with organizations. So if anyone listening is a newbie or a first-time grant writer or a new organization and you're just diving into grant writing, take a little bit of time to learn some of the strategy around grants. I have a resource called Stepa Insider. It's really fantastic. It sends resources out every single month to help you understand how to navigate the grant landscape, what's important in an application, how to incorporate your project with a funder, and taking some of that time to learn about grants, just as Mina was talking about learning about what AI is. The more knowledge you have about what the granting system looks like is really helpful. And then you can use this tool to support you rather than trying to learn the tool to teach you how to do it. Learn some of the skill sets for yourself, and then the tool will be able to elevate, hopefully, your opportunities and save you time in the long run. All right, that was my little rant and my little plug for my subscription. So we'll shift. I'll shift now to a little bit about those dangers and about the risks with AI. I'd love to know, because it's also one of the reasons I'm a little bit hesitant with technology. Because when I don't understand something, whether it's tech or whether it's a new organization or whether it's going to just a networking event where I don't know people, like, we're all hesitant with change. We're hesitant with things that are different or not the norm for us. And with the nonprofit sector, I think inadvertently or whatever it is, we're behind when it comes to technology in our organizations. And now AI is just coming in fast, it's coming in quick, and some people are jumping on, and some people are like, I don't even know what this is, and they turn a blind eye. I'll be fully honest that I did for a while, and I'm like, hey, Sara, you have to get on board. It's not like you said, Mina, it's not going away. How can we get on board while being cautious with the risks or dangers that might be out there?
Yeah, I think that's as you jump into, and the only way to do this is really to jump into artificial intelligence and using GPT. And I just kind of want to say that I've talked about GPT because that's the main tool that I use. But for your listeners, don't forget to check out Perplexity. Don't forget to check out Gemini. And don't forget to check out Claude. Those are really great tools that are all free, and they have subscription costs, of course, upsell, but all of which have pluses and minuses. So as you consider nonprofit sector, and I totally get the hesitation, especially around technology, you start to realize one thing, though, is that the hesitation around technology is only going to keep us in the same place that we've been for 30, 40, 50 years, which is essentially back to the 1970s. And, we're talking about folks come in and they're going to have to re-traumatize themselves by actually ensuring that they have their intake process all written out, and then they're going to have to tell you why you're there. There's a bit of unfortunate situations that exist within the nonprofit sector when it comes to the human relationships of the end client, the patient, or the participant. The folks that come into our nonprofit sector also want to feel human, also want to feel like they're empowered. And the reason why I say this in the context of artificial intelligence, if you'll follow, is that artificial intelligence actually has the capacity to anonymize a lot of these key issues. And what I mean by that is when we're talking about going out to Calgary Foundation and then applying for some dollars specifically around technology, you want to make sure that you are articulating that that particular technology is going to set you up and set the client up for success, so that instead of coming into the nonprofit sector, the charitable organization, and your client, and you have to, again, go through the intake process, by utilizing technology, you're going to be able to actually help alleviate a lot of the pressure that some folks feel when they come into the nonprofit sector and then ask for assistance as end clients. And we're obsessed about those particular, whether the patients or participants, when they come into our nonprofits. So how do we leverage technology in order to help them? Artificial intelligence and large language models are absolutely the key to unlocking all of this, because it does have trillions and trillions of data points that can help you understand that your nonprofit is really important and your client is really important, but we've got trillions of data sets that suggest that essentially how to articulate that value proposition and articulate that back to the Calgary Foundation about how this technology is going to actually assist everyone across the board. Like, these are the important conversations that we should have. We should have conversations around how artificial intelligence is going to help us apply funding to the Calgary Foundation, for example, and to ensure that our technology is just up to par and it is safe and it's secure. And essentially, at the end of the day, we're here to serve the end client, and we got to be able to do that in the more efficient, more effective way. And the only way to do that is through technology. I know that was a bit of a long-winded kind
No,
of,
that's
you
it's
know,
great. No, I think it's you highlighted a really good point though, because I know through reports from CCBO and other organizations that are sharing about the sector and the state of the sector, they're talking about increased demand, like more services are needed, more people are needing the nonprofit sector than ever. It's our social fabric, our social safety net. Without the nonprofit sector, like our society would not be able to function. And so nonprofits, we need to find ways to start being more efficient, to finding ways to serve our clients better, faster, and more in line with what they need. And technology, as you're describing, I think there is direct answers in that. And so it's an opportunity for organizations to start looking at how can we implement these things to streamline, to better support, get better data. There's like endless possibility. And this isn't just AI, this is just technology in general. And it does require investment, and funders are willing to invest in technology. I've worked on a number of applications with organizations, and I think they've all gotten funded. I have one outstanding right now, because when, as you described, Mina, you have this problem, you have a solution that's going to help your organization have greater capacity, serve more individuals at a faster pace or a better pace, whatever that looks like. Language is fluid here, but being able to elevate your organization by implementing systems and not living 50 years ago trying to do the same thing that we've always done, that's what's really going to elevate the sector. And organizations need to start thinking about that and looking to technology for answers. Because I work with a number of organizations as well where they're stuck in spreadsheets. And I'll be honest, I love an Excel spreadsheet. It's a superpower of a software as well. But it's knowing that there's other systems out there and to explore that. And that's why I wanted to have you on here, Mina, to like highlight these elements and highlight the benefits, because technology is not my sector. It's not my skill set. It's not my strength. And I know that. And there might be people and organizations out there as well that feel the same way, which is why these conversations are really important, to be able to, shine some light on, here's some solutions to explore, what is the need that you have, and then be able to kind of move forward from there. So I love that perspective, and I think it's really important. I feel like you're going to say something.
Yeah, I think as you consider as a grant writer, Sara, when you are doing your initial research about a particular foundation and they might have not been on your radar, and you really want to know everything about them as fast as possible so that you can get that grant out before the deadline. And I'm sure that I'm sure your clients are perfect and they come to you weeks in advance. But let's say
Always.
let's say, in this hypothetical world that doesn't exist, of course, it's a day before the actual application and you need to learn as much as possible. There is no better tool right now to actually just pump in as much data and information. What I mean by data is just basically the website of the foundation or the grantor. And you basically pump that information to GPT and you basically say, give me a summary. Help me understand what the key points are. What are the deliverables? What do they want to accomplish? And the second component of it is, of course, what the nonprofits, what the charitable organization that's applying for this funding is all about, pumping all of that information and out. Hopefully, if you again fine tune and ensure that, like, that process that I know that you've talked about in your wonderful subscription email, that process of just identifying who your key funder is and who you are and making sure that there's alignment. You talk really great about that in your I don't get paid to say this, but I actually do like your emails. When you talk about those key components, Sarah, do you sometimes leverage artificial intelligence in order to summarize those situations so that the process becomes a little bit faster?
I haven't yet, but it's on my radar to start testing it.
Mm.
Because the biggest thing that I've started using actually is note takers in meetings, because the process that I have with my clients is really helping draw their passion out, and the way people speak is different than the way people write. And so when I go through an application or work on an application with an organization, I have them speak to the questions that the funders are asking, and then I get a ton of information. I'm taking notes. I'm now using my AI summary tools to give me language and to help consolidate everything that they say. And some of these note takers are fantastic. Like what they put out, I'm like, that is accurate. It takes me 5 minutes to put my ideas together versus probably 2 hours. So it does help summarize things for me. I'm definitely going to start using it to, when I have all my bullet points, to summarize it and say, hey, put this into 3 sentences because I have 10 sentences. So I think consolidating, it's going to be really fantastic. And it's still having the right information. So that the conversations I'm having with the clients, for them to talk about their organization, to talk about their work, they're the knowledge holders. As you're saying, me, like, you know how to serve your clients, you know how to serve the community. My job as the grant writer is to pull that out, and then it's AI's job to help formulate it in a comprehensive sentence structure. They put the language together in a streamed sequence that makes sense, and then I can go in and kind of tweak it and make it align a little bit better, or make sure that the voice of the organization comes through. And if I put information that is using the organization's voice, there'll be less of that for me to do. So I'm full honesty, I'm still learning and how I'm going to use it. So I love it. It's like, oh, have you tried that? I'm like, no, but I'm going to.
That's a fantastic use case. I really appreciate you sharing that, Sarah. And yes, you're a technologist now. You're official. You're you got it. I know that we started this
Yes.
conversation with you saying that you're still skeptical and all of this kind of stuff. No, you're right into it. That's brilliant, Sarah. Love it.
Fantastic. That's awesome. So I have a couple of questions directly that I've received from organizations that I wanted to kind of spit at you to see, what guidance or support you might be able to offer them, insight, I guess, around, using AI as prospecting tools or, tracking tools. Can AI assist in identifying like relevant grant opportunities for an organization? How might they be able to do that?
The short answer is no. And I'll
Okay.
tell you why. The challenge, and this is good kind of foundational knowledge for folks who are unfamiliar with large language model and artificial intelligence, to go back to the conversation that we had around what it's trained on.
Mhm.
The artificial intelligence of a large language model is only trained on the information that currently exists out there. Now, for Sara and I, who are trained grant writers and know how to sleuth and try to figure out, who's getting out money, how much money they have, what family they're affiliated with, all of that kind of stuff, it's usually word of mouth. It's usually like, oh, this family office has this amount of money, and I'm not going to talk about names, but you know exactly what I'm talking about right off the top of your head, because we know that we're in the sector. I don't think large language models are sophisticated enough in order to capture that type of granular level information. That's why I don't think you're going to be able to ever replace Sara. I know I said it before, said it again, but that's the key component. So sourcing is the key question behind that, and I would say no. You can absolutely, it'll be basically a Google search at this point, where you can go to GPT and you say, what grants and foundations exist in Calgary, and then it'll pop up all the usual suspects, the Calgary Foundation and the rest of them. But I don't think it'll give you anything that you don't already know. But I mean, for novices, for folks who don't know that Calgary Foundation exists,
Yeah.
you can either listen to this podcast or just,
Sure.
Google it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and if once an organization does find a funder, as you alluded to before, you can say, like, summarize this information for me, because sometimes the guidelines are 10 pages long. If we're getting government level, wow, you have to spend some time going through guidelines. Use AI as a tool to summarize. Okay, give me 10 bullet points, 5 bullet points about what this funder cares about based on this information. And so that's to go into the nitty gritties of a specific funder. Would that work?
Yes, and I'm going to try to bring as much value as possible to this podcast. I really want folks to start to look into Google extensions. The Google extensions that are now exist are so incredibly sophisticated that while you're reading through a website, you don't have to cut and paste, you don't have to give GPT, the information. The Google Chrome extensions that currently exist, and I'll give you one that's absolutely incredible, I use all the time, called Harpia, Hapria, Harpia. It's free. Not only will it summarize everything that you see on the page, especially the ones, as Sara alluded to, when it comes to government, extremely complicated language, 10 pages, all that stuff, summarized within a second, which is amazing. But it also, Sara, you know this, sometimes governments want to be helpful. And so they not only give you the 10-page guide, but they also do a little bit of a video. And the video is an hour long. And here you are as someone who is working in a nonprofit, and you're trying to, ensure that, that your end patients and your participants are happy, and that's your main focus. Who's got time to listen to an hour-long YouTube video that the government thought that this might be a good idea for? And so what Harpia does, it will actually summarize the entire YouTube video in order to give you the key points, tell you exactly what are the main things to keep a hold of, criteria, your eligibility, all the rest of it. And so now you've got all the key components without actually having to go through that video, don't have to go through it 2 times, and through speeding through. Yeah, this is just a really great tool.
I feel like that's a game changer. As soon as we're done this, I'm going to find that extension. I'm going to put it on my computer, because holy, that's going to be a game changer for sure. Even the video. And honestly, most government grant videos of like what to do and what they're telling you, they're a direct replica of the guidelines. They're just reading them out loud. And this, I have a pet peeve with that. That's a different conversation. But Mina, let's just sort of wrap up this conversation. Do you have any sort of final advice for organizations that are navigating AI, direction, just opinion, anything you want to share to kind of wrap us up here today?
If you don't use it, you're going to lose it. I really think that this is a tool where you're going to, the more that you start to understand how it works, it's not going to be so scary, and it will be extremely beneficial. So certainly get your hands dirty, really try to use it. If you need any support, you've got Sara, you've got myself. I'm happy to support. I'm working on a little bit of a tool myself, specifically for the nonprofit sector that basically carves out this particular space. And so luckily we've got a community like, that Sara's creating, where folks are happy to share their knowledge, happy to share their information, and happy to support the nonprofit sector. So I continue to work with nonprofits on the side, and I'll continue to do so because I think it's really important work. I can't wait to get my hands dirty and try to understand how we can level the playing field for grants, because as we all know, I think, what is it, 80% of nonprofits in Calgary are operating on $1 million or less operating costs, usually a lot less than $1 million. And then, of course, you've got the 20% that are doing quite well. And so that's what I'm trying to do with this particular tool, is to level the playing field. I'm very excited about it. And that's my 2 cents.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being with us, Mina. And where can people find you if they want to connect with you? Is LinkedIn sort of the best spot, or where would you like them to connect with you?
LinkedIn is definitely where I am the most active, and I do respond to messages, and I am very, very happy to take any messages from there.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. All right, we'll leave it there. And if anybody has any questions following up, this will come out in Step Up Insider. And if you're not subscribed, please do.